There is a silence that follows betrayal. A silence so sharp it feels like a scream, echoing in your chest, shaking your very sense of reality. When the person you trusted most breaks the bond you thought unshakable, the world tilts, and you're left asking, why? Why would someone who claimed to love you risk everything for a moment in the shadows? Tonight, we journey beneath the surface of infidelity. Not for excuses, not for shallow answers, but to uncover the hidden truths that Carl Jung once hinted at. The shadows, the archetypes, the silent wounds that drive men to destroy what they once cherished. This is not just about betrayal. This is about seeing what lies beneath the mask, about reclaiming your vision, and about understanding that his betrayal was never your failure. This is Heartsync X, where we cut through illusions and speak the truths no one else dares to say. There is a silence after betrayal that is unlike any other. It is not the calm silence of peace, nor the gentle hush of rest, but a suffocating stillness that screams louder than thunder. A woman sits in that silence, her chest tight, her breath shallow, her soul splintered by something that wounds deeper than lies. The collapse of trust, the death of certainty. The man she thought she knew, the man she believed in, has fractured her reality. And yet this story is larger than heartbreak. It is a mirror of the human unconscious. To speak of infidelity is not to point fingers or assign blame, but to wrestle with a truth far more complex. For as Carl Jung suggested, most modern relationships are not the meeting of two whole beings, but collisions between two wounded psyches, haunted by shadows they do not understand. When a man cheats, it is rarely just an act of lust or cruelty. More often, it is the symptom of a fracture within himself, a split between the mask he shows the world and the chaos he hides from his own reflection. Society rushes to simple labels. He is selfish, broken, evil. But the truth is rarely so convenient. What if the betrayal was never about you? What if it was the eruption of his inner war, and you were simply caught in the blast? To understand infidelity is not to excuse it, but to peel back the layers until the human story beneath is revealed, and only then does healing become possible. Every man enters love wearing a mask. He plays the role of protector, of gentleman, of loyal partner. He calls you beautiful, remembers your birthday, carries himself as the good man. This mask is what Jung named the persona, the socially acceptable self we polish for others. But here lies the danger. The persona, when never questioned, becomes a prison. A man begins to believe that the mask is his essence. He clings to the illusion of being good because he has successfully hidden the impulses he fears: anger, desire, insecurity, recklessness. Yet what is hidden does not vanish. It waits. And eventually, something cracks. Perhaps monotony dulls him. Perhaps the glance of a stranger ignites something long buried. Perhaps the pressure of life becomes too heavy to bear. Whatever the trigger, the mask slips. And in that collapse, he does not betray you so much as he betrays the illusion of himself. Cheating becomes the desperate escape of a man suffocating inside his own disguise. Underneath the mask emerges chaos, impulses never integrated, emotions never confronted. Because he never learned to hold his shadow, to reconcile his darker side with his conscious self, he ends up running from it. And in that running, you become collateral damage. Many men stray not out of hatred, but out of emptiness, not from malice, but from being lost in roles they never chose. The good son, the good husband, the good provider. They wear the costume of stability so long, they forget what is real. And when the mask shatters, their choices often wound the ones who trusted them most. But deeper still lies the shadow, the repressed, unacknowledged part of the psyche. In countless men, this shadow contains fragments of their masculinity. We live in a world that demands men be strong, but condemns aggression, that asks for sensitivity, but mocks vulnerability. The paradox is suffocating. Boys are told to man up, to never cry, yet also to be gentle and kind. In this contradiction, they repress vital parts of themselves. Yet what is repressed ferments. It does not die, it seeks release. And when it bursts, it often takes destructive forms. Cheating is one such form. It is not about the other woman herself, but about what she symbolizes. Danger, vitality, the wild animal side of him he has long denied. In her arms, he tastes what he has lost, the raw edge of risk, the illusion of potency. It is not intimacy he craves, but a false initiation ritual, a counterfeit trial of manhood. Once, young men proved themselves through rites of passage, through facing death, through solitude, through trials that demanded courage. Today, those rituals are gone. They scroll, consume, numb themselves. They grow into men physically, but emotionally remain boys. They feel unseen, diminished, powerless. And so some seek in infidelity a counterfeit initiation, a reckless grasp for aliveness. Jung warned that when the shadow is ignored, it forces itself upon us. The man believes he is making a choice, but in truth, he is being pulled by unconscious forces he never dared confront. In this light, infidelity is not empowerment, but proof of his weakness. It reveals the power he has never truly claimed, the power to face himself honestly. What makes this tragedy even sharper is the projection of the anima, the eternal feminine within the male psyche. Every man carries within him an image of the ideal woman, the muse, the savior, the divine. When he meets a real woman, he unconsciously projects this inner figure onto her. She seems magical, transcendent, perfect, but real women bleed, cry, argue, demand. And when the illusion fades, he feels deceived, cornered, disappointed. He cheats not because he has ceased to care, but because he cannot love the reality once the fantasy dissolves. The other woman becomes his new projection, another canvas on which he paints his unconscious ideal, until she too proves human. Thus the cycle repeats, not as love, but as spiritual escapism. He is not looking for you. He is searching for salvation he cannot find, because the divine feminine he seeks exists only inside him, unintegrated, unknown. And so betrayal is born not from strength, but from fear, not from abundance, but from emptiness. It is the story of a man fleeing from himself, and of a woman left holding the silence he could not bear. There is a kind of silence that comes long before the act of betrayal. It is not dramatic, not even noticeable at first. It appears in vague answers. In the hollow way he says, "I'm fine." In the way his laughter feels rehearsed, and his presence feels absent even while sitting next to you. This silence is not the calm before the storm, but the muting of a man's soul, the absence of a language he never learned to speak. Long before he betrays you with another, he betrays himself with silence. And this is where the real fracture begins. Most men are not raised to articulate their inner world. As boys, they are told to be strong, to be useful, to carry weight without complaint. Tears are mocked, vulnerability dismissed, sensitivity punished. They are taught how to build, to conquer, to succeed, but never how to say, "I feel afraid, I feel empty, I need to be held." Emotional expression, the very core of intimacy, is stripped away from them before they even know its value. So when the storm inside rises, they do not speak it, they flee it, And often, they flee into another pair of arms, not out of passion, but out of panic. Carl Jung once wrote that until the unconscious is made conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. For the man who cheats, the unconscious is not a place he has explored. It is a prison he has avoided. His dissatisfaction, his restlessness, his fear of true intimacy, all remain unspoken, simmering beneath the surface. He smiles through dinner conversations, makes excuses for why he is busy, nods when you talk, but inside, he is drowning in emotions he cannot name. Then, one day, he runs into another woman's body, into her silence, into her temporary embrace where no emotional language is required. It is not always about love, and often not even about lust. It is about escape. And in this sense, infidelity becomes not an act of seduction, but a symptom of a man's inability to remain with himself. Our culture is complicit in this silence. Male friendships revolve around sports, games, business, and achievement. Rarely do they revolve around confession, vulnerability, or tears. A man can live decades without ever being asked, "How do you really feel?" And even if someone asked, would he know how to answer? For too many men, feelings are foreign lands without maps. And so when storms rise inside them, loneliness, shame, exhaustion, they do not face the weather. They run for shelter in secrecy. To the betrayed woman, this feels deeply personal. Why did he not speak? Why did he not turn to me? But the bitter truth is, he did not cheat because you were lacking. He cheated because he could not bear to face himself, let alone to face you with honesty. This does not excuse him. It explains him. Many of these men carry enormous guilt afterward, not just guilt toward you, but toward something inside themselves they cannot name. They sense that they have betrayed something sacred, not only in the relationship, but in their own soul. They are estranged from their inner life, stumbling through the dark with no language, destroying what they most need, simply because they cannot speak. This is why infidelity so often leaves men hollow, even when they try to act unaffected. The betrayal is not just against you, it is against the part of themselves that longed for truth, but never received permission to exist. Here is the paradox. The man who cheats is often not a villain, but a man unprepared for the weight of intimacy. To love someone who has never met himself is to live in constant disorientation. He may smile at you while secretly terrified of being truly seen. He may hold you while emotionally absent, unable to sustain closeness without feeling suffocated. And so he sabotages it, not because you were not enough, but because his own silence had already hollowed him out. Infidelity, in this sense, becomes not an act of hunger, but an act of fear, a man running from the language of his own soul. And beneath this silence lurks another figure, the trickster. In every myth, the trickster wears two faces, the deceiver and the fool, the master of illusions who laughs even as he destroys. Jung saw the trickster as an ancient archetype dwelling deep within the unconscious. And in modern men, the trickster takes the form of deception not only toward others, but toward themselves. Some men cheat not from emptiness, but from intoxication with the game itself, the thrill of secrets, the rush of danger, the seduction of living in two worlds. It becomes less about love or lust, and more about proving to themselves that they can outwit life, break rules, and get away with it. For them, deception is not a slip, but an addiction. The danger is not simply that he lies, but that he convinces himself the lie is harmless. He tells himself he still loves you, that this doesn't mean anything, that he will stop. He rationalizes until even he believes his own script. But each step deeper into the double life erodes something sacred inside him. He may laugh, charm, and act like everything is fine, but inside, a fracture grows wider, because every betrayal, no matter how well hidden, is first and foremost self-betrayal. The man who cheats begins to crumble from within, even if the world applauds his cleverness. Our culture romanticizes this trickster. In movies, he is the charming rogue, the misunderstood genius, the heartbreaker with a tragic past. His betrayal is glamorized, his deceit painted as freedom. But in truth, he is not free. He is a prisoner of his own compulsions, a child in a man's body testing boundaries long past the point of maturity. And while he convinces himself he is too clever, too unique, too complicated for ordinary fidelity, the truth is that the game always ends the same way. The masks collapse, the lies suffocate, and he is left staring at ruins he cannot repair. What makes this archetype so dangerous is not that he is evil, but that he believes himself innocent. He cheats and calls it fate. He betrays and calls it growth. He lies and convinces himself it was mercy. And in the end, the destruction is not only yours, it is his. For Jung, the only way out of the trickster's snare is integration, pulling the shadow into the light, admitting the deceit, facing the self without disguise. Yet few men do this. Most remain trapped in the game, chasing the next thrill until nothing remains but the emptiness they tried to avoid. And for the woman who loved him, the haunting question remains: was any of it ever real? The answer is painful, but liberating. Yes, it was real, but not the way you imagined. The love you thought you had was mixed with illusions, projections, and shadows he never confronted. What was real was not the mask he showed you, but the frightened boy behind it, the boy who never learned how to become whole. What makes betrayal even more insidious is not just the man's silence or the trickster's grin. It is the culture that quietly excuses it. From locker room jokes to movie scripts, from casual advice between friends to lyrics in the songs we hear every day, there is a chorus that hums beneath the surface of society. It whispers, "Boys will be boys. Men are like that. It's natural. Don't take it so seriously." And because it is whispered rather than shouted, it seeps into consciousness unnoticed, shaping how men see themselves and how women are taught to endure. This is not just personal weakness. It is cultural permission masquerading as destiny. Carl Jung often spoke of the collective unconscious, the invisible inheritance of myths, archetypes, and beliefs that shape us without our awareness. Infidelity thrives in this collective shadow. The myth of the real man insists that he cannot be bound by one woman, that to conquer is proof of strength, that loyalty is dull, while freedom is thrilling. We see it in films where the charming man always has options, while the faithful one is dismissed as boring. We hear it in music that glorifies conquest, but never endurance. We feel it in the way male infidelity is shrugged off as common, while female infidelity is condemned as unforgivable. This double standard is not accidental. It is the cultural script men unconsciously adopt. And when he cheats, he often does not ask himself, "What have I done?" Instead, he asks, "Why is she overreacting?" This normalization of betrayal is one of the most poisonous diseases of our time. Because when society excuses dishonesty, the man internalizes that excuse. He tells himself, "Everyone does it. It's not that bad. As long as I don't get caught, does it even matter?" He borrows the lines culture has written for him, never realizing they are not his own thoughts, but hand-me-down justifications, passed through generations of men who never face their shadows. And every time he repeats those excuses, something inside him decays. The betrayal does not just corrode the relationship, it hollows out his own soul. He betrays his conscience long before he betrays you. Yet even here, he clings to the illusion of being a good man. He cheats and then says, "I just made a mistake." He apologizes and imagines that guilt itself is redemption. But guilt without transformation is only theater. Culture tells him he can cheat and still remain noble as long as he feels bad about it. And so he walks in circles, believing remorse is enough while never confronting the deeper truth, that betrayal is not simply weakness in a moment, but the failure to face oneself honestly. To step outside fidelity is not rebellion. It is spiritual failure, a refusal to honor the sacred, to stand in the discomfort of truth rather than flee into illusion. Each betrayal chips away at something essential. A little less trust in himself, a little less capacity to love deeply, a little more numbness. Outwardly, he may carry on, smiling, working, performing. But inside, the rot spreads. Culture told him that betrayal was freedom, that options were proof of masculinity, that loyalty was optional. But his soul knows otherwise. Deep down, every man knows that betrayal does not end when the affair ends. It echoes, and the loudest echo is not in the heart of the woman he wounded, but in the hollow chambers of his own being. For he was not only unfaithful to her, he abandoned himself. And self-abandonment is the deepest betrayal of all. This is why so many men who repeat the cycle of infidelity seem increasingly lifeless, even when surrounded by new excitement. At first, the escape feels intoxicating. The secrecy, the thrill, the illusion of power. It feels alive, but eventually the taste turns bitter. He may not admit it aloud, but somewhere deep within, he knows. Every time he betrays, he loses another fragment of his own integrity. Every time he lies, he becomes less whole. And no matter how many new women he chases, no matter how many escapes he engineers, the emptiness always returns. Because the truth he is running from is not you. It is himself. Jung called this condition soul loss. When a person becomes estranged from their own inner world, their own essence. In this state, a man can achieve success, build wealth, even maintain the image of happiness, but inside there is a spiritual exile. Joy becomes shallow, meaning dissolves. Sex without love becomes another form of numbness, and no matter how much he consumes, it never fills the emptiness because the one thing he truly betrayed was the boy within him, the boy who once longed for love, for honesty, for safety. That boy watches silently as the man he became chooses fear over growth, illusions over truth. But here lies a paradox. Even in the midst of destruction, Jung believed that breakdown carries within it the seed of breakthrough. A man who finally collapses under the weight of his lies, who loses everything and reaches the raw rock bottom of his illusions, may, if he dares, find the path back to himself, not through charm, not through empty apologies, but through humility, through admitting the shadow he has long denied, through facing the silence he once drowned in distractions. This is rare because most men repeat the cycle endlessly, not because they are incapable of change, but because they never pause long enough to hear what their betrayal is screaming at them. You are not who you pretend to be. And for the woman who bears the wound of betrayal, the pain feels unbearable, personal, unique. But in truth, his betrayal was never about your worth, your beauty, or your significance. It was about his inability to love anything fully, even himself. This recognition does not erase your pain, but it releases you from false guilt. For once you understand that he did not betray you, but abandoned himself, the question shifts. You stop asking, "What was I missing?" and begin asking, "What was he running from?" You stop carrying the burden of fixing him and begin reclaiming yourself. You stop waiting for him to change, and instead trust the intuition that sensed his shadow long before the mask slipped. Infidelity, then, is less about the act itself and more about the fracture it exposes, the gap between the life he pretends to live and the self he refuses to confront. And in that gap, no peace can survive. To see this clearly is to reclaim your own vision. You do not have to hate him, but you do have to see him as he is, a man fleeing himself, a man terrified of the truth, a man whose betrayal says less about your value and everything about his silence. There comes a moment after betrayal when the noise subsides. The shouting, the questions, the pleading, all of it eventually falls into a stillness so sharp it cuts deeper than anger ever could. In that silence, excuses collapse, illusions dissolve, and what remains is the undeniable truth. He did not simply betray you, he fled from himself. This truth does not soften the pain, but it reframes it. Infidelity is usually described as an act against another, but in its deepest sense, it is an act against the self. It is a fracture in the soul of the betrayer, a man divided between who he pretends to be and the parts of himself he has never faced. At first, he tells himself it was temptation, a mistake, a moment of weakness, but such explanations are shallow. The reality is harsher. He abandoned the self that might have endured discomfort, monotony, fear, or vulnerability. Instead, he escaped into illusion. In the arms of another, he became someone else, untouchable, unburdened, unseen. For a brief moment, he escaped the weight of responsibility, the pressure of intimacy, the mirror of his own insufficiency. But illusions always demand payment. Because in cheating, he not only abandoned you, he abandoned his own reflection, his own integrity. And no matter how far he runs, that reflection will follow him. Jung described this as exile from the soul. The man who betrays does not just cross a moral line. He crosses the threshold between his conscious self and the unconscious forces he has long ignored. Each betrayal accelerates this exile. Outwardly, he may function, may even thrive, but inwardly he withers. What dies first is joy. What crumbles next is meaning. He may laugh at parties, succeed at work, charm strangers, but deep inside, a hollow echo grows louder. The tragedy is not simply that he wounded you. It is that he has lost himself in the process. For the one who cheats again and again, there comes a slow spiritual decay. It does not always appear in visible collapse. Sometimes he looks perfectly intact from the outside. But the truth is, inside, where his capacity for love shrinks, where his soul becomes numb, where nothing satisfies. Because betrayal, repeated enough, becomes not just an act, but a condition, a way of existing in which everything sacred is treated as disposable. And in that numbness, he discovers too late that he was never escaping you. He was escaping the boy inside, who once longed to be honest, to be whole, to be loved without disguise. Yet even here, even in the ruins, Jung would say the possibility of redemption still exists. Every breakdown carries within it the seed of a breakthrough. If he is stripped of illusions, if he finally collapses under the weight of his deceit, if he loses everything and can no longer hide behind charm or denial, then, only then, might he begin again, not from ego, but from humility. Few men reach this place, Most repeat the cycle, endlessly apologizing, endlessly running, endlessly blaming circumstances. Not because they are incapable of change, but because they never pause long enough to listen to what their betrayal was trying to reveal. You are not who you pretend to be. And for you, the one who endures the betrayal, the pain feels like a dagger to the soul. You wonder why you were not enough, what you lacked, why he strayed. But the bitter truth is that his betrayal was never about your worth. It was about his inability to truly love anything, including himself. This is not a dismissal of your wound, but a liberation from false guilt. His betrayal does not mean you were less. It means he was less than he could bear to face. To realize this is to shift the question from what was wrong with me to what was he afraid of. It is to step out of the prison of self-blame and into the clarity of truth. Infidelity is less about the act itself than about what it exposes. The chasm between the life he pretends to live and the self he refuses to confront. And once you see that chasm, you cannot unsee it. This is the brutal gift betrayal gives. Vision. You stop waiting for him to change, because you realize you cannot heal a man who refuses to meet himself. You stop bargaining with his promises, because you know words without integrity are empty. You stop shrinking yourself to hold together what was already broken before you arrived, and in that recognition, you reclaim your power. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But the path to authenticity is not gentle. It is steep, raw, and often cruel. Betrayal is one of those cruel teachers. At first you believe you lost something irreplaceable. Love, safety, trust. But perhaps what you truly lost was the illusion that you had control. The illusion that kindness guarantees loyalty. The illusion that love can protect you from another's unhealed wounds. In this sense, betrayal does not always arrive to destroy. Sometimes it arrives to reveal. It shows you where the lies lived. It shows you what was already broken beneath the surface. It shows you the weight you were never meant to carry, the burden of fixing what he refused to face. And as painful as it is, this revelation carries its own strange freedom. His betrayal is not your mirror. It is his. When he looked at your clarity, your stability, your willingness to love, he could not bear it because it reminded him of all he had not yet become. So he ran, not from you, but from the version of himself that your love reflected back to him. You stood as a mirror, and he shattered it, hoping to escape what he saw. But mirrors do not truly break. They reflect. They endure. And you, the one who remained, have already done something he could not. You did not flee. You faced the wound. You bore the silence. You stayed with the truth, rather than running from it. That is not weakness. That is awakening. In Jungian psychology, awakening is rarely gentle. It tears masks apart, shatters illusions, exposes shadows. But it also gives you something sacred, the possibility of becoming whole. To endure betrayal without collapsing into bitterness, to face your pain and still keep your heart alive, is a kind of initiation. It means you are no longer living in illusions. You see clearly now. You recognize that you were never betrayed because you were unworthy. You were betrayed because someone else was too afraid of his own brokenness. And you became the mirror he could not face. That clarity, painful though it is, frees you. Because now you know that his betrayal was never the measure of your value. It was the measure of his exile from himself. There is a truth few dare to speak. Betrayal, as devastating as it is, does not have to be the end of your story. It can be a portal. Not a portal into cynicism, Not a descent into bitterness, but a doorway into a deeper version of yourself, one who has faced the fire and come out alive. Betrayal strips away illusions you never realized you were carrying. The illusion that love guarantees loyalty. The illusion that if you give enough, sacrifice enough, love enough, the other will stay. The illusion that you can heal someone else's wounds by loving them harder. When betrayal arrives, it tears all of this down, leaving you raw, vulnerable, and unprotected. But in that vulnerability lies the seed of your awakening. For when there is nothing left to protect, there is finally space to see clearly. The pain you feel is real. It cuts into your soul, into the deepest parts of your identity. But that pain is not your identity. What defines you is not what was done to you, but what you do with what was done. This is the choice betrayal presents. You can remain in the ruins, replaying the story endlessly, or you can rise from it, carrying with you a clarity that cannot be taken away. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And sometimes, the path to that self is carved by wounds you did not choose, but were forced to face. Betrayal becomes the sculptor, cutting away illusions until only the essence remains. Think about it. What broke was already broken, long before you arrived. His betrayal was never about your worth. It was about his refusal to face his own shadows. You were never meant to carry that burden. You were never meant to shrink yourself to hold him together. You were never meant to silence your intuition to preserve a love that demanded you ignore your truth. His betrayal is not proof that you lacked anything. It is proof that he lacked the courage to meet himself honestly. And once you truly see this, you are free, because you stop asking, "What was wrong with me?" and begin realizing it was never mine to fix. The irony is this: while he fled from himself, you did the opposite. You stayed. You sat with the silence. You felt the pain instead of escaping it. You faced the shattered mirror rather than running from it. And that, though it may feel unbearable, is the very work of transformation. Jungian psychology teaches that integration requires us to face the shadow, to bring into light what we would rather deny. He could not do it, but you did. You faced not only his shadow, but your own, your fear of being abandoned, your need to be enough, your illusions about control. And in walking through that darkness, you became more whole. This is why, though betrayal wounds deeply, it can also awaken a power in you that no one can take away. The power to see truth, the power to choose yourself, the power to walk forward without illusions. You may think you have lost something irreplaceable: love, trust, safety. But what if what you lost was only the illusion of those things? What if the safety was never real? Only a mask? What if the love you thought you had was already hollowed by his silence? What if the trust was already fractured long before you knew? Betrayal does not create the fracture. It reveals it. And in that revelation, painful though it is, you are given the gift of truth. Truth is harsh, but it is also liberating. For once you see clearly, you can no longer be deceived by illusions. You are no longer bound by the masks others wear. You are no longer trapped in trying to hold together what was already broken. You are free to begin again, not in denial, but in clarity. This is not to romanticize betrayal. It is cruel. It leaves scars. But scars are not weaknesses. Scars are proof that you survived. They are reminders that you walked through fire and came out alive. They mark you not as broken, but as forged. And perhaps, in some distant future, he may remember you. Not as the woman he betrayed, but as the mirror he could not face, the mirror that reflected back to him the truth of his own brokenness. But you cannot wait for that. Your healing cannot depend on whether he ever understands. Your healing begins the moment you realize that his betrayal was never your failure. It was his surrender to fear. It was his exile from himself. And you are not responsible for a man who refuses to meet his own soul. So let betrayal be not a prison, but a portal. Let it strip away illusions, not strip away your worth. Let it teach you that the depth of your pain is also the depth of your capacity to love. Let it remind you that your willingness to stay present with truth, even when it hurts, is proof of a strength he never had. And above all, let it set you free. Free from the weight of carrying someone else's unhealed wounds. Free from the burden of fixing what was never yours to mend. Free from the illusion that your worth depends on another's loyalty. You are not defined by what he could not see. You are defined by the clarity you now carry, the strength you have discovered, the wholeness you are becoming. For now you know. You were not betrayed because you were unworthy. You were betrayed because someone else was afraid of the mirror of truth you unknowingly held before him. He tried to shatter that mirror, but mirrors do not break so easily. They endure. They reflect. They reveal. And you too endure. You too reflect. You too reveal. You are not the broken one. You are the awakened one. And from this moment forward, you walk not with illusions, but with clarity. Not with fear, but with strength. Not defined by betrayal, but transformed by it. This is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of becoming who you truly are. Betrayal will wound you, but it does not have to define you. His choices were never the measure of your worth. They were the measure of his exile from himself. You were not betrayed because you were unlovable. You were betrayed because he was too afraid to face the mirror you unknowingly held before him. And now you stand at the edge of something greater. This pain, brutal as it is also a portal, a doorway into the truest version of yourself, the one who sees clearly, the one who loves deeply, the one who cannot be broken by illusions. If this message resonated with you, let it not end here. Carry it forward. Share it with someone who needs to hear these words. And if you want to keep walking this path of clarity, strength, and awakening, subscribe to Heartsync X and join our journey. Because here, we don't just talk about love. We unmask it. We don't just endure pain. We transform it. And we don't just survive betrayal. We rise from it. So remember this: you are not broken. You are becoming whole.